Yo, 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 this is Keith Roth from Sirius XM, The Dictators, Frankenstein 3000. This is Metal Show and my buddies Jason and Tom. And what's happening, dudes?
Woo! Thank you, Keith. What an introduction. Now, Keith, as I was telling you right before we went on air, a couple weeks ago, we had the rest of the dictators on. You were supposed to come on, but there was a little mix-up. But that's why we're having you come on anyways by yourself to get your story. I'm kind of glad it worked out that way because you have a killer new solo album out that's coming out
Thank
March
you.
21st. So let's talk about that. At this point, talk about your decision to do a solo album.
Well, I played in another band called Frankenstein 3000. So they were saying, maybe it's time now for a new Frankenstein 3000 record because the last one really, real record came out like 20, I think 18, The Blunt Truth. And then there was a compilation that came together during COVID. So I'm like, all right. I started writing some songs and then some of the songs I started thinking this is really not a Frankenstein 3000. It's a very personal record. And
Sure.
some of the songs I sent to the Dictators whatever they accepted, kind of became Dictator songs. And then all of a sudden I started like getting into the zone. And one of my partners in crime, Mike Jaffe, he plays with me in Frankenstein 3000. He also plays in a band called Soraya. And he's
Okay.
like, this stuff is really cool, man. And you should consider doing this as a solo record. And my buddy Danny from the band Angel said, dude, it's time to this should be a solo record. And then I was like, and it really was the whole time. So yeah, it became the law of diminished returns,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
excited about it. It's
Oh,
very cool.
wow. So, Tom, you have any questions for Keith?
None. I got lots actually.
Yeah.
So I love the new song. What a great hook. What a great hook that song is. You don't feel
Thank you,
like
man.
thinking today? So you're putting out a whole album with that to follow?
Yeah,
This gonna be a whole
it's a whole record. It comes out on March 21st. The next single drops on Friday, which is actually a cover tune by Curtis Mayfield called Superfly. And
Oh,
it's something,
wow.
yeah, it's something I always wanted to record. And I had the idea and I was working with Bob Pantella, from Monster Magnet and
Yeah.
Atomic Bitchwax. And I was thinking like he'd be the greatest guy to play drums on. He's such an incredible drummer. And I had all that percussion that wound up on the track with Bob in mind. And me and Mike went in there and cut that with an original song. And I'm like, it's going to be on the record. But really, after recording a song called Pain in that's when the whole idea of this really being a record took off. So yeah, it's 11 songs. I think it's 11. I think the CD's got 12. Streaming is 12 and the vinyl have 11, but it's a journey only in my head. If you guys pop in my head, you can understand there is a concept to it, but it's
Well,
fun.
even the current single Tom was talking about, I don't feel like thinking today. I mean, I myself have had that kind of feeling, so many, hey, I just wish I could have a kickback day, not really have to take life too serious, just chill out. And that's kind of a feeling I get from this, that the song itself.
Yeah, I was just fed up with everything at that point. It's just like, I don't want to watch the news anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about your problems, to be honest, my problems. It's just like, I just need to decompress and I just came out and said it. It's like, I literally said it to myself. I don't feel like thinking today. And I'm like, that'd be a pretty cool title. And then I wrote the song in like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It was one of those things. And I had actually sent that to the Dictators and they're like, that's pretty cool, but it's not really the Dictators. I'm like, good, because
Yeah.
and then we put it together. But yeah, that was really, and I knew I need an opening song for the record. And it kind of has that groove where that's where the journey begins. And then, jump on. Hopefully people will jump on. Hopefully you guys will jump on when it comes
Yeah,
out.
and Keith, when you're a talented songwriter like yourself, you don't really need to cover other people's material. But of course, it's like it's a
Thank
fun
you.
thing to do. And and I bring it up because in prepping for today's interview, I checked out a cool cover Frankenstein 3000 did. Cool Prince cover, Raspberry Beret, and I tell you, man, you just kill it.
I recorded that right after Prince died. It was
Wow.
like we were recording that record, and I'm like, let's pay homage to Prince. And I think it came out on the digital version or CD. But I love Prince, and one of the most talented cats ever. So I like always putting like a cover or
Yeah.
two on an album because let's face it, all the greatest songs have already been written. So if you're going to cover a great song, at least you got one checkbox in the positive on an album, and also brings people in if they like the
Yeah.
songs. But
Yeah.
thank you. I'm glad you liked it, man.
Yeah, and my co-host Tom, he's in the band Held Hostage. he's a songwriter, guitarist himself. So I know, Tom, you must have a couple questions for Keith about, his guitar playing and playing in a band with Ross the Boss.
Well,
Absolutely. Ross and I go way back. I've toured when Ross was in Man of War. I did their Fight in the World tour. Ross and I did a U.S. tour. I think in 2018 we toured together. And he's actually the godfather of my son. He was at the hospital when my son was born. So
wow, that's
Ross and I have
amazing.
we have a big history together. We talk almost every day. So how did you end up in the Dictators? And I love Ross. So I know he's an easy
Listen,
guy to
as you know, he's a freak of a guitar player.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
I mean, people always said you play guitar like Tom Petty, and that's all I ever aspire to be.
Okay, yeah.
I write. I'm a bass player, and then I started writing, using the guitar as a tool, and then I'm like, all right, I got okay at it. And playing in a band with Ross, he shows you a lot of stuff, but sometimes I sit in awe of watching him because he is incredible player. I mean, and on the record, my record, he does a song where he plays more like BB King. It's not like the Man of War Dictators vibe. And I said, Ross, this is the song for you. And he's just, he's one of those guys that can give me goosebumps to watch him. And they really don't need me to play guitar, but I'm one of those guys that really who's going to sit there. I'm not like a front guy, so it's more like my Linus security blanket.
Absolutely. Well, Ross is incredible. So anything he touches, any guitar he plays, his tone is in his fingers. Ross always taught that to me. And I never realized it until I really got into lead and stuff like that. Ross is just an amazing guy. What a great talent to play with, man.
It's so funny you say that because, he always says this amp sucks or that amp sucks or this is great, but he sounds the same through everything he plays. He doesn't use any pedals. He just plugs into anything. You can give him a $30 amp that he bought at Corvettes back in 1971, and it's going to sound great. I mean, and he'll tell you it is all in the fingers. I'm sure if you put Eddie Van Halen or any of these iconic guitar players, and I feel Ross is actually in that league, but I mean, he's one of those guys that he could play on anything and it's all in the fingers.
Absolutely.
And what a good guy to learn from and hang out. I didn't realize you guys were that close. That's great.
Oh yeah. He was when my son was born, he stayed here for 4 days. My wife was in the hospital. We had a hell of a party.
Are you guys in Brooklyn or in Queens?
No, I'm actually he was playing with Man of War. I'm outside of Auburn. I live in Syracuse. So he would
up there.
He'd come over and hang out after he was done with rehearsal, and he'd stay at my place. And then we were going to the studio to record my new record. Scott Columbus was playing drums with us. And Scott was his drummer. Ross was producing the album. We're on our way to do it, and I stopped and called my wife. I had a bad feeling, and she went into freaking labor. We went back, and we were in Oswego Hospital. I mean, it was a blast. It was crazy. It was a crazy 3 days, but no,
he may not want people to know it, but he really is a great guy.
Oh, he is. He drove my mom to the hospital. We didn't have room for his car.
The more I've known Ross for a very long time. Frankenstein 3000 used to play a lot with the Dictators, more so the NYC version when Manitoba was in the band. So we played together. We did this annual thing for like 8 straight years. And then do you know Dean Rispler?
I know him, yeah. Yep. He produced yep.
Yeah, he was in the Dictators NYC when Andy wasn't a part of it. But they were doing a show in New York at I believe it was at Berlin, and it was around the holidays, and they got offered to play Go Girl Crazy in its entirety. And Dean couldn't do it. And actually Manitoba said, hey, Keith, there's a record you grew up on. Could you fill in? You think you could play bass and do the show? And that was the first record I ever bought with my own money, was Go Girl Crazy, Fordham Road, Alexander's record department. I mean, I had records, and the ironic thing is my middle brother actually went to kindergarten with Scott Kempner, Top 10, and Manitoba. So the history of the band has always been around me, but then I did this gig. So, they got back together as a 3-piece. It was Scott, it was Andy, and it was Albert. They brought Albert into the band, and Albert has been connected to the Dictators, since the Blue Oyster Cult days. Sure. He actually should have been the guy that played on Go Girl Crazy, but the 4 of them were, and then sadly, Scott with the diagnosed with dementia, and he really wasn't able to be part of all the activities. So they're like, we really should get a singer. And believe it or not, Albert said, hey, I played with Keith a few times, and maybe, and then Ross like that, that's not a bad idea. And Andy's like, Keith Roth, oh, I know Keith, the radio guy. Yeah. I didn't know he played. But I went down, and and Albert invited me down, and they were rehearsing at Smash in Midtown. And I went down, and I was like, this must be fun. I didn't really expect to get the gig. I like, let's play some songs. And then after, a couple hours, I think it was Ross or Andy said, "Hey, you want to be in the band?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, man." It was fun. And and since then, we made a record and we toured about 4 times already, and we got some gigs coming up this weekend. So I really love playing with those guys. It's really a blast.
And that's gonna be a great feeling. You've had this association with the band. You were a fan of the band, and it's much more than just getting up on the stage, even with the band and playing these classic songs. I mean, you've got an album that you worked on that you're a part of, so you're
Yeah.
part of a legacy now, the history of the band.
And that was such a fun record to make. And everybody could, Andy is an incredible songwriter, and he had the burden of doing it all by himself for all those years, and he did well because some of the greatest songs in my world were written by Andy. But it was nice having Albert's a songwriter, as
Sure.
Tom, Ross, a great songwriter. I write songs, so to really feel a part of that making of that album. And we did it between tours, and then when the last tour at the Damned or Spain, we all got together and we finished it, and then had the great Ed Stasium mix it. And hearing these final mixes, and it's funny, what you said, Jason, about being part of the history. I'm like, wow, man, I'm on a Dictators record. It's pretty cool. My brother's like, holy shit, I grew up with these guys. I'm 12 years older than you, but yet you're part of that history. So it was cool.
And Keith, like let me ask you, with the talent in this band, the Dictators, you guys, it was like a band of 4 frontmen, all great songwriters. How is it not an ego bag? The chemistry is great. Everybody gets along. It's beautiful.
No, you got to be at rehearsal before you say that. There's a lot of ego, but all good ego. Everybody keeps their ego in check. No, I mean, everybody's cool. There's a lot of respect for one another, and we listen to everybody's ideas, and then usually the best ideas rise to the top. And but yeah, really there is no ego. Everybody walks in that room, and the jokes, I mean, we get really nothing done because we sit around, we bust Ross's balls for an hour, like, why didn't you wear the loincloth?
I mean, I don't know if you got a chance to I'll have to send you a clip of our interview we did with other guys, but it was so funny because first we have Albert and Ross come on, and Andy was kind of late, but he eventually comes on, and just as Andy jumps onto the interview, both Ross and Albert are talking what a great guy he is, and we were talking about one of the songs that Andy wrote that Albert sings, and he was saying, well, Albert could tell you better what he wrote the song about, but the funny thing was Albert actually did a better job than Andy, but it was total comedy.
What song was it anyway?
I believe it was really what is it? Let me see. Really good. I think that's the one we were talking about.
Oh, the one that Albert sings?
Yeah.
Well, I wrote that song.
Oh, okay. But there was another one that you.
Well, I wrote it with Albert. Which one?
I think it was what was it, Tom? Let's see. My imaginary friend. I think that might have been it.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing about Really Good was it's an old Frankenstein song, a demo, and I gave it to Albert, and he wanted to do this whole, kind of like Lust for Passenger, Iggy Pop. Albert really took a rock and roll song and turned it into that masterpiece. But I mean, like the ball busting, and it's just, if you guys were to like travel with us, I guarantee you could be in the worst mood ever, and within 15 minutes, I mean, you'll be laying on the floor laughing.
I believe that. I mean, that's how that interview was with the other 3 guys. And as a songwriter, Keith, it's got to be a great feeling that, because Albert was even explaining about Really Good. He says, "Oh no, that's a Keith Roth song," and he's like, "Keith brought that in." He goes, "But Keith brought in a version he did, totally different than what we ended up doing on the Dictators album." So, what's that like for a legendary guy like Albert Bouchard to do his magic with your song?
To watch that guy in the studio, like seriously, like Albert's a great drummer, right? We know that,
singer, songwriter, everything,
singer. He's a really great guitar player. He's got a great sense of melody. He's an amazing arranger, and he's really the guy that's like, when you present ideas, he's the guy that adds that last sprinkle.
Yeah,
and
I believe that.
He's a great engineer. I mean, he is really he's like an MVP on a baseball team, because he really does a lot of stuff, and and he takes things very seriously, his whole craft very seriously. So but yeah, being a Blue Oyster Cult fan and knowing him throughout the years and being in a band with him, and sometimes I'll argue with him. Like I really shouldn't argue with Albert. He's got a lot more history than I do, and he's such a he's one of those guys that you just want to pick him up. Like he get mad at you, but you just don't want to lift him up. Kind of like in Austin Powers, like Mini Me.
Yeah.
He would get a kick out of that. At least
I bet you would.
He's adorable, is what what I'm
Sure.
trying to say. But yeah, he's cool.
I mean, I lost track of how old he is, but I interviewed him a few years ago, and he was like 75 or 76 at the time, and he was in just crazy shape. He told me like up until a few years ago, he was running marathons and everything and working out still at his age.
He's I think he's 77 now, and the weirdest thing is that we played with him on his birthday. I think when he turned maybe 77 or 76.
Yeah.
We're out on the road with the Damned, and he was the first time in all those years and all that history. I think that was the first time he ever played a gig on his birthday. But the first tour we did, the night before we were playing shows locally, and we actually wound up doing a gig with Blue Oyster Cult, and Albert wound up playing a little bit with Blue Oyster Cult. And the next day we were leaving, and we had to push everything back because he was running the New York Marathon.
Yeah. Wow.
28.6 miles, and whatever the number is. And then we got in the van and we started heading up to Canada. He's taking his socks off, covered with blood, and his nails are falling off.
Wow.
He played the next day. I think the next show is Providence, Rhode Island, and he did Blue Oyster Cult. And then he did the marathon, and then we were in Providence the night after.
What a warrior!
Yeah, but you look at these guys that are and there's like I saw the Rolling Stones over the summer, and they were amazing, and they're 80 something years old, and Albert at 77, Ian Hunter at 85, writing these great songs. It just shows you, man, that
and after listening to some of the Frankenstein stuff, and just kind of way you look, your attitude, Keith, way you write your songs. No doubt you're a Rolling Stones fan. I was just kind of curious. Do you lean more towards like Mick or Keith as far as your influence?
Keith. Yeah, it's all about Keith. I mean, when I was younger, I tried to emulate him too much, and I learned the hard way. So now it's just about the music and all that stuff. But I just thought, Keith Richards was like the coolest thing on the planet when I was a kid. From the style and the look and the way and the songs, he was the complete package. And Mick is great. It was funny. I was at a Nick game about 2 years ago, and Mick Jagger was sitting but he wasn't sitting in celebrity row. He was sitting at this tape. If you guys ever been to Madison Square Garden?
Yep.
Yeah,
I have.
Yeah. So when you walk up, up the aisles, and then there's just tables there. So everybody's in celebrity row, but there's Mick Jagger by himself. With a baseball hat on and drinking a beer, no security, no nobody.
Wow.
And I said, that's so cool, and nobody believed it was Mick Jagger, right? So when the replay came on, Walt Frazier was like, look, that's Mick Jagger. I've never seen him at a Knick game, but ironically, he was at that game that I was out against the Rafters. And but yeah, they've been one of my favorite bands since I was a kid. The Stones, the Dictators, the Stooges, punk rock in general. And of course, Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple. And then I know you guys do a metal show. So, I loved when the new wave of British heavy metal first kicked in. And, I love Manowar, especially the first album. And then, bands like really dug like Budgie and Samson, some of the, I'm sorry, not saying, I didn't like Samson. I was not happy when Bruce Dickinson got the Iron Maiden gig, but then I learned to love Bruce. I love Paul Di'Anno, but, I mean, I just, I love all kinds of music.
Yeah, me too. Even though we're a metal show, I listen to everything because I have an appreciation for everything from not just metal, but like from Tom Petty to the Eagles. Because let's be honest, that's why that stuff's on the radio like 40 years later because the songs are just that good.
Right, you're right. Those songs are so timeless, and it's funny. I see a lot of kids, 15, 16, and it's like it's no different than when I was, that age. Kiss, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, I think the last iconic band to really resonate with all the generations I think to follow is probably Nirvana, as far as like,
the sad thing, Keith, is at least the age I'm at, a lot of my rock and roll heroes are either retiring or dropping,
Yeah, I know. It's like you get to that age and, really sad. My buddy, you guys might've known Carl Cochran, passed
Oh,
away.
yeah, I heard awful news. Yeah, played with Joe Lynn Turner, Eric Singer, a lot of.
Yeah. And he played with Ace Frehley for years, and he
Oh
wrote like
yeah,
Psycho Circus. But I know Carl since I was a teenager, and hearing about him passing away in a car accident. And sadly, all you hear this stuff too much, lately, and maybe
can
we're
you
getting to that.
imagine the poor mother? I mean, oh,
Yeah, what
yeah,
right. You throw that in the mix as
yeah,
well. Yeah.
yeah.
Crazy, man. Crazy. That's
I got to
why.
throw it to you, Tom. You must have a few more questions.
Absolutely. So, for two questions. So, one, why don't you tell us about the next shows you got coming up? You said did some this weekend. Tell us about the Dictator shows and what are you playing? Your new stuff? Are you playing all? Is it a whole history of the Dictators? What's the live show like too? I'm sure all the listeners would like to know about that.
Well, we got gigs this Friday coming up, the 28th in Woodstock, New York, which isn't too far from you guys at the
Yeah.
Colony. And then the 29th, we're playing the Debonair Music Hall in Teaneck, New Jersey. And then on the 30th, oh, wait, no, that would be March 2nd, because March 1st is the Debonair. March 2nd is Long Island, my father's place. And all the shows we're playing with Steve Conti. You guys know Steve Conti?
Oh, sure. New York Dolls, yeah.
New York Dolls, and he's playing with Michael Monroe. But yeah, the show is really the history of the band. Stuff from Go Girl Crazy and Blood Brothers, and songs off the new record. And then the thing after that, we're doing the Little Steven cruise, with the helicopters and Social Distortion. And on one of the nights on the cruise, we're playing the Go Girl Crazy record in its entirety. So now that we learned a few of that, we'll do some stuff that we haven't done yet as a band. But yeah, so that's really what to expect, the whole history of the band, from the new record to the first, from the first record to the new record.
And before we wrap up the interview, I think we got to ask a little bit about, you mentioned being on Sirius Radio. Talk a little bit about that and what that's like.
You never know how life is going to throw you some stuff. I never aspired to do radio ever in my life. And I was in a band in the 90s, and this girl came out and did a little story on the band, and her name is Amy Christie. She ran some magazines, and she was actually a publicist for Charlie Watts and Ronnie Wood. But so we became friendly, because we liked a lot of the same music. So she winds up moving to New Jersey, and she talks to the general manager of a new radio station that just opened, and this was in the 90s, called The Rat. And she calls me up. She's like, "I think you'd be perfect to do a radio show with me." And I'm like, the station was cool, but I was like, I don't know, man. I can't be that. Like, in the Memorial Day weekend, the big, corn. I was like, I don't think I could do that stuff. And she's like, no, it's like a specialty show. We can play the Ramones. We know people. We can get great, guests and all that stuff. And so I walk in. My daughter was just born, and when I walked into the meeting, my hair was sticking up like it was crazy. And I just put my daughter on this big table, and we just talked about the ideas, and they said, let's do it in a show called Electric Ballroom that was on the air from 1998 to 2024 when I finally retired it. And I'm doing the show, and it was great. We'd have people like Joey Ramone come down and John Paul Jones. We knew a lot of people in the industry, and it became like a really great show. And then one day I get a call from Sirius XM, which was just Sirius at that point. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Can you do a punk show? The Punk Yard, they had it all mapped out, and you could do a weekend on this channel. I had no idea what they're talking about. I envisioned Wayne's World, I envisioned like satellite radio Wayne's World. But they said, it was one day a week in the city, and the bread was enough to come into the city one day a week. And
okay,
when I went there and I got off the elevators, and I walked through that glass door, and I saw like Carol Miller and Pat St. John and Meg Griffin, and it looked like you landed on the Starship Enterprise. I educated myself pretty quickly. And one of the great joys I had of doing radio for 20 something years is producing and working with David Johansen. You guys know David,
from New York. Yeah, Dolls. Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of having a little rough time right now. So there's a Sweet Relief Fund if you want to check it out, maybe donate to him. But yeah, working with David. And so I never aspired to doing radio, and it actually turned out to be a really great career.
And how fun was that for you, Keith? Again, going from being a musician all your life, an artist yourself, probably doing a ton of interviews like this and going on the radio talking about your craft, your music, to kind of being on the other side there.
The other side is fun, man. Like what you guys do, because, you sit down with you guys that you looked up to, but because it's an interview, you could really like get in and ask anything you want. And I thought that was kind of cool. It's tough when you interview friends that know you from the music side, because It's like, what are you, a dick? Like you're asking me that
Yeah,
talking to the man, but these things
we
that
got
I
an audience here.
ask, when
Yeah.
you put a mic in front of somebody, like I could say, hey, it's stuff, I want to hear myself. But yeah, it's a very different dynamic.
Yeah.
It's similar, but yet very difficult.
And it's fun. Like we have fun doing our show, but what's funny is like our show is totally unscripted. The only thing that's scripted is we prepare for the show. Like we know you're coming on. So last night I sent Tom. I load him up with Keith Roth music, and we check out your music. So we have something to talk about because when we have a guest come on, we want to actually know what we're talking about or sound like we do.
No, you guys are great. You
Yeah.
guys are great. It's you guys. How long you guys been doing this for?
Well, me and Tom have been doing this show about 2 years now. We're going on our second year together. We had another previous host, but he was no longer able to do it, and it's kind of morphed into something else. It started out as an old school kind of radio podcast where we would just talk about metal bands, and we always kind of wanted to have guests. And then once Tom came on board, that's what we started doing, and it's totally morphed into something just bigger than we ever thought it would be.
Well, I mean, are you a musician too, Jason? Or
I'm not. I do it more from the love of as a music fan, and like you said, it's a way to reach out to musicians that I'm a fan or even just want to support and help them get the word out about their music. And so that's kind of my perspective. And Tom's got the opposite perspective, where he's obviously a professional musician, plays in a band. He's a president of a record company, by the way. So he's got many hats.
yeah, that's great. You have a different perspective too, because Tom, knows all the ins and outs, and he knows.
And I might mention Tom has got one more credit, Keith. He's also a rock and roll realtor.
Well,
I do everything. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we know that the rock and roll realty is paying the mortgage, so
Yeah, absolutely.
I understand about record labels and being in bands, and yeah, it looks great, but it's a roller coaster ride. There's nice to it. Neil Smith from the Alice Cooper Group is a realtor.
Yeah.
So I mean, he'll tell you, and Alice Cooper sold a shitload of records, but the realty took him to a whole different level of tax bracket. Pretty cool. Where do you sell houses at, Tom?
I sell them in Syracuse and Rochester, New York.
And the property values are going up over there, right?
Oh, they are. We used to be, believe it or not, houses out here used to be 100,000. You can't buy a fixer upper for 200,000. It's a lot different where you guys are at, but our average price is about $250,000 out here now, which has really jumped in the last few years. But I sell like 100 homes a year, so I'm full time. Plus, the record label is really doing very well, and I have a publishing company too. So I'm one of them guys. I sleep 4 hours a night. I've always been that way, 4 to 5 hours. That's all I need. I get up, I go. I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Go. That's Tom. Yeah. Well, Keith, it's been great having you on the show. We're about ready to run out of time. Otherwise, we'd keep you a little longer, but the Zoom is going to cut off in a minute. But before we let you go, any plans to do live shows in front to support the new solo album?
Yeah. We're doing some shows with Foghat, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah, we got some gigs with Foghat. The first one is May 17th in Patchogue, New York, at the Patchogue Theater. I think that's most likely going to be the first show behind the record. But Frankenstein's on hiatus. We put out a 25-year compilation that came out a few weeks ago. And hopefully it's called Lost in Space Volume 1. There is room for a Volume 2, but really the main priority for me right now is obviously the Dictators and my solo record. So we got some Foghat May 17th at the Patchogue, and if hopefully we'll get up to your. I'm sure the Dictators are going to be up in Syracuse area soon. So I look forward to meeting you guys in person.
Well, thanks again, Keith. And I'll tell you what, we're going to have you back once the album drops, because I'd like to really promote the hell out of it and hear the whole thing. Okay.
No, I would love that. And last thing is, Tom, your band should play with the Dictators, when we do stop up in that, that Syracuse area,
Absolutely. Come, we'll definitely do that.
All right. Well, good luck selling the houses. Good luck with the label. Good luck with the band. And Jason, good luck with, with everything. What else do you do, Jason, real quick?
I work with disabled people during the day, so I got a regular day job too. So that's great too.
That's amazing. That's incredible what you do, man. That's a beautiful thing, man.
Yeah, it really is. And it helps you appreciate your life,
I really do, man. I appreciate people, and I appreciate you guys. It was great spending some time with you, man.
Thanks again,
Thanks,
Keith.
Keith.
Take care, buddy.
Take care, man. You guys have a good